Welcome to the Billionaire Lifestyle Podcast with your host, Emmitt Muckles. Please visit iTunes, Stitcher, or emmittmuckles.com to listen to all the episodes for free.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Billionaire Lifestyle Podcast. Today, my guest is, introduce yourself.
I am Chef Chris Clarke, and I have a podcast myself called Something About Food, and I am very happy to be here.
See, now let me explain how I met this beautiful entity. I was at the podcast movement, and I am like a kindergartner. When I go, hi, I got blocks, you got blocks, let's play. Mm-hmm. And I found myself in this, it wasn't quite a circle, it was more of a square of women. These dynamic women who are connected to earth and heaven at the same time. And we shared and communed. We broke bread over Asian food.
It was such good food. That's my thing right there. That's why I have the podcast, because food's what I'm all about.
I want to ask you a question before we get deep into it, because I had these two questions that were resonating in my head.
Go.
The late Anthony Bourdain, everyone he came across, he referred to as chef. In my youth, I worked in a kitchen where there was a chef and a sous chef. Mm-hmm. Is there a difference nowadays? Has the vernacular changed?
Well, there's definitely been a change because of TV. Like Julia Child would be considered a chef, and she did take some formal training, but She didn't take on the formal training that used to be institutional with French techniques and all of that.
Like the Culinary Institute.
Right. My brother went to the Culinary Institute of America in Hyde Park. He is a trained chef. I have been working in restaurants since I was 15. I am 50 now. I've worked front of the house, back of the house, every position you can think of. And so it took me a while to be relaxed when people would call me chef. Even though I was at one point an executive chef in a small restaurant, it took me a long time to really accept that because I didn't have that formal training.
Right.
But I think if you have immersed yourself in food, if you have worked in restaurants, I mean, even Anthony Bourdain, who did go to the Culinary Institute of America, considered himself more of a cook than a chef.
Yeah.
And I feel the same way. Like, I don't want to go back into a restaurant. I would never be able to be a Bobby Flay or a Jacques Pepin. It's just not my thing. I'm a chef. How am I going to put this? More of the people, I guess. To me, it's not about technique. It's about community. That's what food is to me.
And you clearly demonstrated that because you're like, hey, you're a cool individual. Let's go get something to eat. You're like, hold on, I got to round up a couple more people and we're going to go. You're like, don't go anywhere. We are going to go eat. I was like, What are we going to eat? You're like, it doesn't matter, but we're going to eat. And I know this place. And then we sat down and we broke bread that way. And then I was a guest on your podcast.
Yes.
And now you are a guest on mine. Now, my second question that I want to ask you before we get into it is, historically, in my life, women were the food handlers, preparers, the ones that dictated your diet. Mm-hmm. When you get into business, it is the polar opposite. It is historically, it's been a male-dominated industry. Why is that? I don't understand.
There's this institutional patriarchy that comes from that French technique. Escoffier was the one that really got the whole thing going with your sous chef and your saucier and all these different hierarchies. And women just weren't usually allowed into the kitchen. There was a woman chef in Lyon, and I forget her name, and she looks so formidable when you see pictures of her, because this is back in like the 20s and 30s, and she just looked like, don't bring it at me, I will bring it at you, know, that kind of thing. But the men who were going into it were bringing what they had learned from their own mothers.
Yeah, and that's what's so weird about it is you had these people who they gained a lot of their knowledge from their mom, you know, from when they're a kid. And, you know, even when I think about aprons, I think about the older women in my life who had aprons on. And then when I became a cook for the Hilton, and I did some 3- and 4-star restaurants until I got into my vocation that I'm in now. It just mind boggled me. Like, why aren't there more women here?
It definitely was the time that kind of brought these male chefs forward. Women weren't allowed to do anything except maybe be on the stage. And even then they were looked down upon. And it wasn't until I think what really brought it to the forefront, definitely Julia Child, Alice Waters out of California, and they started to really bring the female voice into it. It really wasn't until Food Network, I think. And as much as I malign the Food Network, I have to give it credit. Like the Two Hot Tamales, the two ladies that had that TV show, people really started to see women in a chef's coat and go, oh, okay. Anne Burrell, who I actually went to college with. She's a year younger than I am. And I went to college with her at Canisius College. She's another one. She's a face that everybody knows now.
Right.
And there are so many talented women coming up through the ranks now because of cooking schools, because of the Food Network, because people are starting to realize that more voices make for better food.
Yeah, you know, when I was, and I'm going back, and this is going to be my last point, most of the women that I saw were typically pantry and pastry chefs. Outside of that, when it came to hot food or line or banquets, men, all men.
Yeah, and pantry and pastry were, usually things were done ahead of time. You weren't in the heat of it. You know, I always say it's like battle. You know, it's like going to war with
it was. On a line.
I mean, you got to have you got your warriors next to you. You're all working together to defeat the enemy. And by the enemy, I mean, you know, getting those plates out to those customers. And I think that mentality is a very masculine one. And it's one I was comfortable with because I had two brothers growing up. Not all women are comfortable with that. A lot of times they'll feel pushed out by that, which I can totally understand. Because that women are more collaborative, they're actually really good at it. It's just that combative style that a lot of executive chefs had, where the yelling and the making you feel less than because you made a mistake. That's not what women do. Yeah,
that was really weird. When I what's the guy's name who's always just berating his line?
Oh yeah. I see him with the English guy.
Yes. And because I saw him, I was like, I would never work in it. But I've seen that style, but that's promoted in media when really the first time I came across a chef like that, it was this young Jewish chef. And he would just he would taste and he would just throw it back at, and I was like, you're not from Detroit, are you? He was like, no. I was like, because you're about 60 seconds away from meeting your doom. But the first chef I worked with, he was Italian, and he definitely had a temper. He was a knife thrower. He never was really throwing it at you, but he was a knife thrower. But we weren't related, but I'm from such a small town, and we were all Catholic and Italian, so it was almost like we were related. So to me, it was just family. Right. It didn't bother me because I was coming into it knowing him from, I was 15 years old. He started this restaurant in his house. This is somebody I knew. It wasn't like it was somebody I was coming in on and he's yelling at me without knowing. Right. So let's go back.
Yes.
Let's talk about your history. What got you into food at 15?
Well, actually, I mean, I've been into food all of my life. I said I was Italian. I have a huge family. My mother was mostly Italian, a little bit of Jewish. My father was Irish. There's 40 first cousins, just huge family. Yeah. My grandmother on the Italian side was an amazing cook. She actually knew how to make French pastries because her Jewish mother had learned them from the French landlord that she had. So there was all this. I mean, when we sat down to a dinner at my grandmother's house, it wasn't like, here's a plate with everything on it. It was like, here's one course, then the next course, then the next. She had scissors for grapes. She had paring knives for pears. I mean, it was insane. So food was a big part of our life. My father wasn't around much. My mother needed our help in the kitchen, especially when we had these huge family parties. I mean, there'd be 40 people for Christmas Eve.
Wow.
Yeah. And when I was like 7 is when I got told that I needed to help out with the Feast of the Seven Fishes, which is a Christmas Eve Italian Catholic thing. And I was put on the cutting board cleaning squid when I was 7 years old. And it didn't seem weird to me. This is just what I do. It wasn't until later when I would get in high school and, I would be talking with my classmates and they're like, we're having ham for Christmas. I'm like, we're having squid, Right.
Because you grew up upstate New York.
Right. Very small village, 375 people.
So were you the oddball because of your lineage, this Mediterranean, north of England heritage?
It was really funny. I mean, I love that village very much. When I was growing up in the early to mid and late 70s, we were ethnic in that town. Yeah, we were considered ethnic because everybody else around us was mostly farmers, dairy farmers.
Oh, yeah.
And had lived in that area. I mean, that town is over 200 years old, and some of those families had been there since the beginning of the town. So we had moved into town. My mother and father bought the house and started having all these kids. There were a few other Catholic families in town, so it wasn't too odd. There were other big families, so that wasn't odd either. But yeah, the food was definitely, we were eating artichokes. My mother was going in the backyard and picking rocket, which is arugula. Yeah, and when I was a kid, I thought that was a weed, and she was making us eat weeds for dinner.
Right, and arugula is so awesome. I mean, I just discovered
really
it like 2 years ago, and I was like, what is this flavor? I had it. This is what got me. This is my thing for breakfast, which is red pepper, probably seared or just put some heat on it so it starts to release its sugars and stuff like that. Yeah. Arugula, an egg, goat cheese, and sourdough.
Have you ever done the egg and bread where you cut the hole out and you fry the bread? I
have not done that. I was the way I grew up, you couldn't throw away that center.
You don't throw it away. You still toast it and have it on the side.
Ah, got you. So,
we didn't throw anything away either. And I used to make this joke about my mother. We would call my mother, who is now passed, but we used to call my mother the martyr of the burnt toast. So, do you know what a Bathtub Mary is?
Or no,
Mary
I don't.
On the half shell? Okay. So, Bathtub Mary or Mary on the half shell, if you look in an Italian backyard, they'll often have this half dome with the Virgin Mary statue in it.
Yeah.
So that's a Bathtub Mary or Mary on the half shell. Okay. So I used to joke with my mother that we were going to build one of those, but it was going to be her. Because growing up, if we burnt the toast, she would eat it. Because you couldn't waste it.
Right.
And then we would always have friends who would come by to visit, because, there were 6 of us, 7 years, lots of friends. And so let's say she's making pork chops. She would say to you, Emmitt, you have that pork chop. I'll have a fried egg. Right? So she's this total martyr. So I told her I was going to make this statue. It was going to be her eating the burnt toast. There are children. And she's handing off the last pork chop, So we wasted nothing, whether it was the burnt toast, whether it was, do you remember this steak when you would do a rare steak and there would be the blood on the plate?
Yeah.
We thought of that as sauce, and we would just put our bread in there and soak it up.
I didn't really get into because, me being an African American everything is well done. It wasn't until I fell into the culinary field that I started realizing all these different techniques, these different temperatures. You know, there was one temperature in my household. Done. I mean, that included vegetables too. Vegetables were done. There was no al dente. There was none of that. It was just done. This isn't done. Start over again. Go fix me another plate. Yes. So I discovered those things. And the one thing that is, as of late, who's been introducing me into new foods is my daughter, who just got married, because she's the one who got me into ramen. Because before her really introducing me into ramen, which is, I thought of the stuff that you have when you're in college or when you're on a very, very fixed income, and you get those packages. I didn't realize that it extended out so much deeper, and there's a culture behind it. So but let me digress. I've digressed again. Here's what I want to find out. You're an extensive traveler, and you made some decisions in your life. You said you kind of pictured, and this is what the billionaire lifestyle is about. At some point, and it's usually later in people's lives after like the age of 40, that they take inventory of their life and go, I don't like this anymore. I thought this was going to make me happy, and they do something else. What's your story on that?
So I had worked in restaurants. I worked for natural grocers. I worked for an online grocery store. I worked for a cooking school. And every job that I've had, there's been this line that I had to toe and this box that they wanted to put me in. I am a strong woman. I have opinions. I have ideas. I believe that I am very creative, and a lot of times I was told I was being too aggressive, that I needed to just do what I was, told to do. And the last job I had, they went in a different direction and they ended my position. And I'm sitting there in my condo in Longmont, Colorado at the age of 47. And I'm like, I can't work for someone else again. I can't go back into that box. I am done. And that's when I started looking at my life, and I said, I've got this condo. I've had it for 9 years. The only places I've ever traveled in the world are Mexico and Canada. I need to see the world because I love food from everywhere.
Right.
So I sold almost everything I had, and I went and hit 19 countries in 340 days.
Now, let me ask you this, because a lot of people would love to do that. But you know what prevents them from doing that? Spouses and children.
Yeah, see, I'm single. Been that way all my life. So it was pretty easy for me, and I totally get that. But that being said, I have friends who I stayed with along the way who are expats, who have lived in other countries for many years, doing whatever job they were doing, and raised families. One of my families that I stayed with, one of my friends, their youngest son grew up in Tanzania from I think a year into 8 years old, and he speaks fluent Swahili, and he's got blonde hair and blue eyes.
Yeah, that's a curveball.
But what is so amazing is they did it. I mean, yes, you have to look and see what jobs are out there, but there's no reason you can't take your family with you. I have friends who sold everything they had and lived in Panama for a year. Their kids were in their teens, and they needed something new. So they went and did that.
You know what's really funny to me is that in this country, and I've been saying this, and I see evidence of it every day, and it's probably not true, it's just my take on it, that we are getting dumber as a society. It's true. But I think what it is, there is so much information out there that people can't really decipher what's common sense, even though common sense doesn't, but what's just kind of, this is the foundation, and everything above or below is extra, especially when it comes to food. Because here is the one thing, and I'm gonna put it to you this way. How many people can cut up a chicken, a whole chicken?
Yeah, we talked about this. So most people, I say most, yeah, I'm going to say most, 75, 80% of the people in the United States don't know how to do it.
That's great. Well, I understand because you can just go get your chicken parsed out. And I'm just saying chicken because it is kind of a staple when you learn to cook.
But here's the other thing. Of that, let's say 75 to 80%, at least half, if not more, of that 75 to 80% are only eating certain parts of that chicken. And that drives me insane.
Why? What part of the chicken do you aspire people to eat more of?
Every single part. That's the problem. So I eat vegan most of the time because I have high cholesterol, but I have no problem with food, what anybody's eating. I just wish people would realize that there is flavor in every part of that chicken. Chicken feet, oddly enough, make the best chicken broth.
Really?
Yes, because they are full of, what's the word I'm looking for? Cartilage.
Yes.
So it's got lots and lots of flavor. And I'm not saying that everybody needs to be making chicken broth with chicken feet. But if you're only eating the chicken breast, what is happening to the rest of that chicken? That is a lot of food waste that I just can't get behind. Chicken thighs, I think, have more flavor.
Oh, that is what... So I went through this period where my life changed. I went from being married to not being married. So now I had freedom, which it kind of, when you go from a scenario where you think I'm good, and then you have this freedom, I can do whatever I want. No one's going to be like, nah. I would make these meals, and I would make them in the morning for my day, which consisted of a vegetable and a bean, and usually chicken, beef, or lamb.
Yep. And
I was single, so I could afford to eat exactly what I wanted. And the beef would be grass-fed beef. But the chicken I would just stockpile chicken thighs because of how they have this fat content in them. And they have this texture to them. And they have this flavor. And whenever I think about it, when anyone would say, why do you choose a thigh? I'm like, have you ever had a bad gumbo? Because that is what you use in gumbo, which is the thigh, and it gives you so much flavor. Breast, I don't really care for because...
that's just it. They've been done to death.
Yes.
They have chicken breast and salmon have been done to death. Those are the two that irk me the most. And
I wonder why they don't use more lamb, because even religiously, lamb and goat is always there. That's why I love Caribbean food and I love Indian food, because
Mexican
they use natural foods.
Yeah, and I've got such an open mind to all the different kinds of meats out there. I just interviewed a woman who told me that she'd had horse meat in Kazakhstan. It's not something I ever want to eat, but I'm not about to go to Kazakhstan and say, stop eating horse meat, because that's a part of their culture.
Yeah.
And I think in America, for a long time, we got used to our mothers, not my mother, but I'm saying in the general American sense, and I'm talking before the 1970s, we got used to our mothers overcooking lamb. Because they were told, you got to overcook everything or we're all going to die. And so people thought lamb really sucked, and it doesn't. It's amazing.
It is amazing.
A lamb chop that's cooked medium rare, it just melts in your mouth.
I'm going to ask you this. How do you get fluffy, perfect rice?
Well, that depends on what rice you're using.
Basmati rice.
Basmati rice. So one of the easiest ways to do that, there are actually two easy ways. One is called the pasta method. And what that means is you cook the rice in a pasta cooker with way more water than it needs. Bring it to a boil, cook it for 20 minutes, drain it. You're done.
And you get the fluffiness. Is it because the pasta cooker will pull all that extra starch away from it?
It's because there's so much extra water in there that they don't get stuck to each other with the starch.
Ah.
Now, the other thing you can do that sometimes they do in Asia is you can steam it. But first, what you want to do is toast it. So you just throw the rice into a little oil, just for like a minute, toasting it around. Toss it in a steamer, and then steam it. Again, the oil helps keep the starches from sticking to each other. Yeah. But you still get that nice fluffiness.
Oh, I mean,
personally, I love a sticky rice, but I'm talking Thai food and that kind of sticky rice.
No. I love that rice where you can pick out one grain and nothing else comes with it. All right, so you have picked out this life at the age of 47. You're now 50, so you're 3 years in, and you're heading towards 4. What's the future hold for Chris?
Well, very excitingly, I wrote a book about my travels, and I am almost done. I am self-publishing, and I've been working on a few last tweaks on the editing of the book. So hopefully by the end of October, in time for Christmas, everyone, there will be a book out. And it's a book about my travels, solo travels, mostly vegan travels, a woman over 45 travels, different cultures. Like I said, 19 countries. I worked in different places. I cat sat in a couple of places. I stayed with friends. It was just this really mind-opening journey that I went on, and I wrote a book about it.
With you traveling so much, what about relationships?
So I've never had what I would call a successful relationship. I am a cisgendered heterosexual female, very, very much so. But I am also a little tomboy. I'm a bit butch, my sister likes to say sometimes, which I don't care, you know. And at this point in my life, as much as I adore men and would love to have a man in my life, I'm not willing to compromise.
What do you mean by compromise?
Let me explain. I want to keep traveling. I want to keep enjoying life, wandering about. And if I meet a guy who's up for that and willing to go along with it, great. I don't want to share someone's life. I want to share life. Does that make sense? You know what I'm saying?
So what if you've got somebody who is like, I dig her. And which is weird because you probably could find this person who says, go do you, boo. I'm going to be right here. This is what I like to do.
I wouldn't mind that at all, but I just haven't been successful at making that emotional connection.
Yeah.
It hasn't worked for me.
I hate to say it. You could be, if I took you to Pride, pick one.
Yeah, but I'm not.
No, I'm saying if I took you to Pride, if you and I went to Pride, people would just be, they would just be confused.
Yeah, and that happens all the time. But ultimately, I don't give a shit. And I hope I can swear on this. Cause
No, you can. I mean, that's what it's about. It's being about life. And I want people to get a portrayal of who you are, because we often look at someone.
Right. You see that outside.
And you see the outside and you make the assumption right away. And what's really funny is like, and my wife would concur with this, like your type of look is the look that I gravitate towards. Mm-hmm. And because my wife will go, your type.
Yeah. Well, and this is the thing. So I definitely love my Chuck Taylors. You saw that I had a different pair on every single day I was at the podcast convention. I don't want to ever wear a high heel again. I love my jeans and my comfortable pants. I'm going to live that life. But I also like a push-up bra, and my toenails are always painted, and I'm always wearing earrings. So, I love that I am this amalgamation of all my influences, and it wasn't until I was like in my late 30s that I realized I can dress however I want.
Yeah, that's really true, but a lot of it is this thing, because, and I'm going to share this with you because I worked this out this week, and I realized something. Before probably the 1700s, there was no black person, there was no white person. They literally did not exist in the lexicon of this planet. You were a regional person, which means you were from Italy or some region within Italy. You were from Africa, you were Asian. And to the degree of this, there's only really two things that Americans have given real labels to, which is black and white. Everybody else falls into their region.
Well, Americans did name the Indians when they're actually names. But I get what you're going for.
But you know what I'm saying? That a lot of these constructs are man-made constructs that we really need to get rid of. And like, particularly nowadays, I see people and I have to, because of my age, I have to let go. I have to immediately judge and then let it go.
And it's gotten easier for me since I did do the traveling.
Yes.
Here's a story from my travels. I was in Turkey. I was working at a hotel, and the guy that did the maintenance at the hotel, we were sitting at lunch one day. He's smoking a cigarette. He's got a mustache. He's got the paint spattered pants on. Kind of this macho looking guy. And he turns to me and he says, "Do you want to see my babies?" And I'm like, "Sure." And he pulls out his phone and he shows me a video of him coming home at night and his 10 cats coming to meet him. And that's just one in, a million different, interactions that I had while traveling. But it helped me reinforce what I've always felt and wished that I could project, but you show me who you are, because my eyes aren't telling it to me.
That's true. The eyes are one of the biggest deceivers of information, because you really can't trust what you see. You can't trust literally sometimes what you hear. You have to take all your senses in to make a judgment of this world. That's neither here nor there, but it's true. And what's your podcast?
My podcast is called Something About Food, and it's a way for me to chat with diverse people about what they eat, why they eat it, and how food connects us all. What we say is there's room for everyone at the table.
And what is your ideal lifestyle now?
So once the book is out there, and I'm, fingers crossed, making some money, I would love to be able to buy a place as a home base and live there 6 months out of the year. The other 6 months traveling and, split up if need be. Yeah. But there's so much of the world I haven't seen yet. There's still parts of the United States I haven't seen yet.
You and I both.
I finally got to and spent some time in Montreal, Canada. It's just there, and I'm pointing up. It's just right there.
And it's different. It is. It's very different. It's
bizarre. Like Europe, but above us.
Yeah, it's like Canada's like Euro light.
Yeah.
But then when you get into Montreal, Quebec, and that area, it really becomes like this little French enclave.
Right.
Because I remember, I'll give you this story, and then we got to close it out because we're hitting that mark. Okay. So I had to go up to Quebec to do some work. I was working in spectroscopy at the time, setting up these laboratories. And my boss sends me up there, and I had this $25 per day per diem for food. And it was like $25 or $50. What I would usually do is just eat knickknacks and things like that for a couple of days and then splurge on one. So first day, I'm really hungry. I go to this restaurant. I order the steak. I'm like, okay, my bill's going to be about $50. And I ask for a glass of wine. I'd like wine, please. So I'm sitting there eating my hors d'oeuvres and bread, and I hear, and I look over, and there's an open bottle of wine. You can't give wine back. And I was like, no.
Yeah.
She's like, you order. I was like, okay. I drank that whole bottle of wine by myself. And I walked back to my hotel, And I think I had like a chicken wing or something with me. I smeared those walls with barbecue or whatever sauce was on that chicken wing because I was plastered. But the thing is, you got to know the language when you go somewhere, at least how to navigate.
Well, you do and you don't. I mean, I did pretty good in Turkey, but they were, you know, when you're in a lot of the more touristy areas, they're more open to chatting with you and stuff like that. But I do have to tell you that I was in Madrid, Spain. I was staying in a hostel. And I like to say that I have the conversation skills of a 25-year-old male because that's who I like hung out with most of the time when I was traveling because that's who you meet in these hostels and stuff. So I met my friend James at this hostel and I said, let's go eat something. Off we go. And we find this little place that's got a menu of the day. I don't drink. I've been sober for almost 14 years now. James is 25. He loves a beverage. The guy at the counter says, well, with the menu of the day, you get a bottle of wine. And James is like, well, she doesn't drink. And the guy goes, yeah, but it's free. And James is like, I'm drinking wine, you know?
And I bet you carried him a little bit, huh?
Well, he's about 6'5", so no.
Oh, so he absorbed it well, unlike me, who the sugar and wine just blast me off. So where can everybody find you?
You can find me at www.somethingaboutfood.com. I am on Instagram with Something About Food Podcast. And I take a lot of pictures of food because, like I said, it's my life, man. I love food. I love that it connects everyone.
Awesome. And by the way, you're beautiful.
You are a wonderful man.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, you know how it ends. We are all billionaires. It starts off when one cell is introduced to another cell. It permeates that cell. And this splitting begins. 30 days after that initial occurrence, you're a billion cells. 2 to the power of 30 is over a billion. So now that you know that you've amassed all these things that you need in life, which is food, shelter, clothing, love, get those. Everything else is a bonus. So just go live your life. Figure out what it is that you were here to do and do it. And remember, when you get out the shower, drop your robe. Revel in all the beauty that you are. You may not think so, but someone else does. So it's time for you to appreciate yourself. Look in those eyes, see those galaxies as they float between that thing that brings air into your body to keep you alive. And see it as those galaxies, as above, so below. And when you meet another entity that has those same galaxies, or they may not, but they have the places where they should be, treat them with love and respect as you would like to be treated. Till next time, love you all. Peace.